Warm greetings to all the aunts, uncles, and dear listeners of the sentiments of old age. Today, I invite you to listen to the story. A 54-year-old woman remarries her first love, and 6 months later, everything turns into a nightmare. I am 54 years old. 8 years have passed since my husband died, and my life has been as quiet as a lake after a storm. In our small house, it was just my son Nam and me. Sometimes, his laughter was the only thing that eased the emptiness. I thought my life would continue peacefully like that, with no more room for love or emotion. But fate decided to play a cruel joke. One late afternoon at the end of the year, I stopped by a small cafe on an old street to buy some pastries for a neighbor when suddenly, I heard someone call out, "Han, is that you?" I froze. That voice, I could never forget it. It was Dung, the man I had once loved so deeply during my vocational school days, the same man who disappeared without a word more than 30 years ago. He was still tall, though his eyes carried more weariness now, and that smile, still strangely warm. I didn't know whether to greet him or turn away, I just stood there. Dung stepped closer, his voice hoarse but gentle. "I've been looking for you for years. I recognized you right away, just a little sadder now." I forced a smile, but inside, something delicate began to stir again. In the days that followed, he reached out often, bringing flowers, sharing stories about his years abroad, about a failed marriage. He said he only wanted to find peace beside the woman he once loved. I had thought my heart had long turned cold, yet I found myself moved by his gentle eyes. Mrs. Na, my friendly neighbor, noticed his frequent visits and teased, "8 years already. Heaven finally takes pity on you. But be careful, men our age can be smooth talkers." I just laughed it off, though a small doubt lingered in my heart. My son Nam, however, openly disapproved. One day he said, "Mom, I don't like that man. There's something off about him, his eyes don't look sincere." I snapped back, "You're being petty. He's just an old friend, we're only talking." Nam fell silent, his gaze full of quiet sadness. Maybe he was just afraid I'd get hurt again. 3 months later, Dung proposed. He said he only wanted a companion to walk with through the rest of life, that he'd love Nam like his own son. Moved by his sincerity, I agreed. The wedding was simple, a few close friends, and Mrs. Na as our witness. Nam didn't come. He only sent a short message, "I can't give my blessing for this." I was angry, but my heart ached. Between a mother's love and the yearning to be loved again, I chose what I thought would bring happiness. In the first months of marriage, Dung made me feel young again. He was thoughtful, gentle, and always said the sweetest things. He would tell me, "Just rest, let me take care of everything." I trusted him completely, not knowing that behind that tenderness, a nightmare was waiting to unfold. In the early days after the wedding, my life felt so peaceful that I truly believed happiness had finally smiled upon me. Each morning, Dung woke up early to brew tea while I prepared breakfast. In the afternoon, we went to the market together, cooked dinner, and strolled around the lake when the city lights came on. The neighbors often said I was blessed. At this age, finding a kind and caring man like that is rare. I just smiled, my heart filled with gratitude, believing that after so many years of widowhood, heaven was finally compensating me. But that joy didn't last long. I began to notice that Dung often went out at night. He came home late and sometimes locked the bathroom door to take phone calls, his voice lowered as if afraid someone might overhear. When I asked, he only smiled casually, "Just business, don't worry about it." I believed him, thinking he was busy with real estate work. But one day, while looking for his jacket, I accidentally found a folder in the drawer of his suit, a stack of land transfer documents. The name on the ownership side was mine, but on the other side was the signature of a woman named Lati Lin. I froze. The name was completely unfamiliar. When I confronted him, Dung's face turned pale. He quickly snatched the papers from my hand. "You shouldn't be looking at those. Lin is just a business acquaintance," he said, his tone no longer warm. From that moment, I began to grow cautious. One night, close to midnight, I heard noises in the living room. When I went out, I saw Dung opening the safe, his face tense. Seeing me, he forced a smile, just taking a few documents. But his hands were trembling. When I asked why he needed to do it in the middle of the night, he snapped, "Don't meddle." That single sentence chilled my heart. The man who once held my hand so gently was now speaking to me like a stranger giving orders. The next morning, I called my son Nam. He was silent for a moment, then said softly, Mom, I told you already, that man can't be trusted. Please, come stay with me. I forced a laugh. I'm fine, don't worry. But inside, a seed of fear had already begun to grow. I started taking photos of every document I found and secretly stored them on my phone. Then one afternoon, a woman came to the house. She was around 50, thin, and looked exhausted. When I opened the door, she stared at me for a long moment before asking, "Are you Mr. Dung's wife?" I nodded. She sighed, her eyes glistening with tears. "If so, you should be careful. He's not who you think he is." She handed me a business card and turned to leave. I looked down. The name on it was Letty Lynn. From that day on, I couldn't find peace. Every word she'd said echoed inside me like pebbles falling into still water, stirring up deeper and deeper suspicion. Dung was still gentle, still cooked for me, still smiled, but I no longer felt safe in that smile. One night, he came home late again, and his shirt collar carried the faint scent of a woman's perfume. When I asked, he replied without hesitation, "Probably from sitting too close to the ladies in the meeting." I said nothing. Experience told me, when a man starts explaining too much, it means he's hiding something. That night, I couldn't sleep. The ticking of the clock echoed like the beat of my own fear. I took out the business card again and read the name, Letty Lynn. She worked for a financial consulting firm just a few blocks away. The next morning, I told Dung I had plans to meet an old friend. He only said, "Don't be out too late." I took a taxi to the address on the card. The office was in an old apartment building. As soon as I asked the receptionist, Ms. Lynn came out, as if she had been expecting me. She invited me in, poured me a cup of tea, and said quietly, "I guessed you would come." I steadied my voice. "You told me to be careful. Can you tell me what you meant?" She looked at me for a long time, then sighed. "I used to be his lover. I believed in him too, and I lost everything. Money, home, reputation, all gone. My body went cold." She opened her bag, pulled out some photocopied documents, and slid them toward me. They were complaints filed against Nguyen Van Dung for fraud and property appropriation. At the bottom was her signature, Letty Lynn. Her voice trembled. 3 years ago, he borrowed $500 million from me, saying it was for a land investment, promising to marry me. Then he vanished, sold his house, changed his number. Now that I've heard he's living with you, I just wanted to warn you. Don't sign anything. He doesn't love anyone, he only loves money. I walked home in a daze, drifting through the crowd without feeling my own footsteps. When I arrived, Dung was sitting on the porch, smiling that same familiar smile. "Did you have a nice time?" I just nodded, hiding everything inside. In my heart, I whispered to myself, if what she said is true, I must be ready for the worst. That night, I spoke softly to him. "Can I see the land papers you keep in the cabinet? Just in case. I'd like to know where things are." Dung looked at me for a moment, then smiled. "You worry too much. I've got everything handled." I kept my voice calm. "I just want to feel secure." But in his eyes, I caught a fleeting cold glint, one I had never seen before. From that day on, I realized Dung had changed. His voice was no longer soft. When I asked questions, his answers were curt. "I told you already, stay out of this." Those words cut through me like a blade. The feeling of strangeness seeped between two people who once held hands and whispered to each other. Dung began snapping at me more often, claiming he had to go on business trips, and clutching his phone tightly wherever he went. Whenever I walked into the room, he would hurriedly switch off the screen. Slowly, I felt myself being pushed out of his life. One night, I pretended to sleep. He got out of bed and called someone. His voice was low, but each word reached my ears. "I'll hand the papers over to Ms. Lynn, but you must keep my share. Don't let her suspect anything." Her, that meant me. I held my breath, heart pounding, tears spilling silently. All this time, he and that woman had been working together. Everything was even more tangled than I had imagined. The next morning, I used the excuse of going to the market to visit the local police station. I met a young lieutenant and briefly described my husband. He wrote down my statement and advised me to gather more evidence, as there wasn't enough to open a case yet. I nodded, but on the way home, fear consumed me. I was living with someone who might be dangerous, and I didn't know when he would realize I was onto him. That evening, Dung came home late again. I noticed a fresh scratch on his hand. When I asked, he smiled. "I just scraped against the gate." But while doing the laundry, I found a dark brown stain on his sleeve. When I brought it to my nose, the metallic scent of blood made me tremble. I forced myself to stay calm. That night, when he was asleep, I unlocked his phone. The password was my birthday. I tried it, and it opened. In his messages, I found a note: "It's done. Finish the rest tomorrow morning. Don't let anyone find out." Attached were photos of land titles, savings books, identity cards, all my documents. My knees went weak. So all this time, Dung had been quietly copying everything, preparing to steal my assets. I closed the phone and pretended nothing had happened. I didn't sleep a wink. In the darkness, listening to his steady breathing beside me, I shuddered. The man I once trusted now felt like a stranger, perhaps even a threat. The next morning, I went to see Mrs. Na. After briefly recounting everything, she froze. "Oh my God, Han, why didn't you tell me sooner?" I always felt something was off about him. I asked her to keep a copy of my documents and told her that if anything happened, she must notify the police immediately. She held my trembling hands. "Be careful. Don't stay alone with him anymore." I went home, trying to act normal. Dung looked at me with a half smile, half suspicious glance. "You've been acting strange lately. Are you hiding something from me?" I replied softly, "No, I'm just tired." He stared at me for a long time, then said, "If you're tired, stay home tomorrow. I've got some errands." I nodded, but as soon as he left, I opened the tracking app I had secretly installed on his phone. The destination made me go cold, a cemetery on the outskirts of town. I decided to follow him. Dung stopped at an abandoned grave, knelt down, placed a bouquet of flowers and murmured something. I hid behind a tree, my heart hammering. When he left, I approached the grave. On the headstone were just a few scrawled words: LTL 1968 to 2019. LTL, La T Lin. But the woman I had met days earlier was alive. Or, perhaps she wasn't Lin at all. I stood frozen as a cold wind swept over me, my coat trembling. Fear seeped into my veins. I realized I had stepped into a maze of lies, and the person behind it wasn't just one man. There was some darker force behind Dung I couldn't yet name. Since leaving that cemetery, I've felt like a different person. The name, La T Lin, kept echoing in my mind. The woman who had warned me, who had given me the accusation papers. But if Lin had died in 2019, then who had come to my house? An imposter, or someone trying to drag me into a dangerous game? I dared not tell anyone, not even Mrs. Na or my son. I feared that one wrong word would send everything spiraling out of control. I knew I had to uncover the truth. That night, I lay motionless, staring blankly at the ceiling. The wind outside howled through the window, making my heart pound like a drum. It had been a long time since I'd felt fear like this, not only fear of the man lying next to me, but fear of myself, for not knowing how much longer I could endure. The next morning, after Dung left the house, I took the chance to open the drawer where he usually kept his papers. Among the familiar folders, I found a sealed yellow envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a photo of a thin, haggard woman with dark circles under her eyes and a visible bruise on her neck. It was La T Lin. On the back of the photo, there were only a few hastily written words: "Don't let anyone know." I collapsed to the floor, my body cold and weak. At that moment, I understood. The man I was living with hadn't just lied to me. He might be hiding something far more horrifying. I brought the photo to show Mrs. Na. Her eyes widened in shock. "Oh my God, you actually met this woman?" I remember seeing a news article about her. I froze. "What article?" Mrs. Na searched her phone and handed it to me. It was a news report from 3 years ago. A woman named La T Lin, 51, was reported missing after a dispute over property with her lover. Police had found no trace of her. The photo in the article looked exactly like the woman who had come to see me days earlier. My hands shook uncontrollably. Then who was the person who approached me? If Lin had gone missing, or was dead, then that visitor might have been an imposter, deliberately planting suspicion in my mind to turn me against Dung. But why? What was their goal? I told Lieutenant Fong about my suspicions. He listened in silence for a long time before saying, "You need to be careful." The woman named La T Lin did have a romantic and business relationship with Nguyen Van Dung. The case back then was left unresolved due to lack of evidence. If you have new information, we can reopen the investigation. Whether Lin is still alive or not, I can't say. But if she really did come to you, that could be an important lead. Whatever happens, don't let him know you're suspicious. I nodded, leaving the station with a heavy heart. The image of Dung, once so gentle and respectable, now appeared to me as nothing but a mask hiding a dark past. A few days later, his behavior changed. He suddenly became caring again. Small gifts, sweet words. Let's start over, okay? No more doubts between us. I smiled faintly, but my heart was filled with dread. How did he know I was suspicious? Had someone told him, or was he testing me? That night, he locked himself in his study. The light stayed on until late. I crept closer and heard a rustling sound, like paper being torn. Peeking through the crack in the door, I saw him burning stacks of documents, the same land transfer papers I had seen before. The red glow of the fire flickered across his face, cold and menacing. I heard him mutter, "No one must ever know." When he finally came out, I was pretending to make tea. He looked at me and smiled faintly. "You're still up?" I forced a smile. "Just waiting for you. Thought you might be tired." He placed his hand on my shoulder, squeezing gently. "You're too kind. Sometimes I'm afraid you'll get hurt." I hid my trembling hands under the table. From that day on, I pretended to be weak, complained of headaches and dizziness, to make him lower his guard. At the same time, I secretly contacted Lieutenant Fong again, sending him the photo of Lin and an audio recording I had secretly made. He told me to stay calm and keep observing, but not to reveal anything for my safety. Dung grew increasingly erratic. One night he came home drunk, slamming the table and shouting, "Who were you talking to? Why were you on the phone so long?" I hate being lied to. I stayed silent. Deep down, I knew, love had long died. What remained between us was an empty shell filled with fear. One morning, he said he was going on a 3-day business trip. I nodded, pretending to be calm. As soon as he left, I opened the safe. Inside a hidden compartment, I found a small USB drive. I plugged it into my laptop, and froze. There were countless files. Photos of land deeds, contracts, and images of a woman tied up and crying. Then a video played, Dung's voice. "Sign it, and I'll let you go. Refuse, and don't blame me." Cold sweat drenched my back. Everything was clear now. Dung had coerced someone into signing property papers. I copied all the data and sent it to Lieutenant Fong. He replied, "Mrs. Han, stay calm. We'll act soon." But that night, Dung returned earlier than expected. As I sat pretending to read, he entered the room, his eyes sharp and cold. "What were you doing in my office?" I was speechless. He threw his phone onto the